Before I begin, this meeting is being streamed live tonight so that those who are doing work around police murders and disability will have an orientation on what we've been doing. So welcome to our comrades and activists in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Welcome to the members of the Workers' World People with Disabilities Caucus around the country, and particularly warm welcome to the mothers of PIST. And I love the name of that organization because aren't we really all pissed, who are fighting for adequate bus service for their children with disabilities, to get what their children need to live independent lives, and to keep them out of the schools to prison pipeline. Is this going to work, huh? You hear me? Yes. I may have to move this in a little bit so I can see it, see the talk. I'm a member of the People with Disabilities Caucus of Workers' World. I'm hearing impaired and dyslexic. Is it loud enough? Yeah. Not loud enough? That's better? That's okay? Okay. 20th century capitalism has criminalized people of color. I think we all know this, and we've all been active in the movement that Black Lives Matter, especially African American young men. But it has also criminalized people with disabilities. In fact, quote, the largest component of today's health crisis is the criminalization of Americans with severe psychiatric illness, unquote, according to the Treatment Advocacy Center. The nation's jails and prisons, the center continues, have replaced hospitals as the primary facility for mentally ill individuals, unquote. There is 10 times more people with serious mental illness remained in the state and let me get this in. There are 10 times more people with serious mental illness in the jails than there are in the state hospitals. This is why the disabled activist community has come out firmly and passionately in solidarity with Black Lives Matter movement, with 34 disability groups signing a statement opposing police murders of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner and urging all to do so. Among the signers are the Peoples with Disability Caucus of the People Power Assembly and PIST, Parents to Improve School Transportation. People with disabilities are themselves dramatically more likely to be killed by police. According to a 2013 report by the same group, the Treatment Advocacy Center, and by the National Sheriff's Association, between 1980 and 2008, at least half of the people shot and killed by police each year in this country have mental health problems, unquote. In many cases, police were responding to requests for assistance from families or neighbors to get mental health care for the person that the police instead shot dead. Disability increases vulnerability to police violence. People who, for example, are hearing impaired, autistic, have difficulties processing verbal information, or for other reasons of disability react atypically when approached by police, are much more likely to be tasered, beaten, and arrested, and even killed. Take Keith Vidal, 18 years old, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was tasered, then shot and killed in North Carolina when his family called for the police to help calm him down. Gilberto Powell, 22, who had Down syndrome, was severely beaten by Florida police outside his home when a cop suspected he had a weapon and tried to pat him down. Powell did not understand and ran. The suspicious bulge in his pants was a colostomy bag. Barry Montgomery, 29, diagnosed with schizophrenia and Tourette's syndrome, and who was nonverbal, was beaten and tasered by California Sheriff's Office for 25 minutes. When he was confronted about the smell of marijuana in his general area and did not respond. Montgomery sustained massive and permanent injuries. And most recently, on March 9th, in Atlanta, Anthony Hall, an Afghanistan vet, a musician who has a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, was seen crawling around on the ground naked, and neighbors called the police. And a cop came and shot him dead because he said that the man was lurching towards him. And they left the body on the ground for 2 hours, and school children coming home from school who knew this man and he was their friend saw him like that. Disabled activists note the similarities between the police murder of Eric Gardner and of Ethan Saylor, a white man with Down syndrome, asphyxiated by police in 2013 in Frederick, Maryland. Saylor, who was 26 years old, weighed 350 pounds, and was reported to have an IQ of 40, and was at the theater with a caregiver watching the movie Zero Dark 30. He was so taken with the movie that he wanted to stay and watch it again. He did not understand that he would have to buy tickets again, and neither he nor the caretaker had the money. The police were called. Saylor's caretaker pleaded with the cops to wait it out and not to touch the young man who would freak out. 4 cops jumped him and lay on top of him on an incline ramp, placing 3 sets of handcuffs on him. He grew quiet. His last words before he died was, "Mommy, it hurts." Now, Frederick has a special police unit trained to deal with people with disabilities, but the cops who came didn't wait. As in the case of Eric Gardner, the death of Saylor was ruled a homicide by the coroner because his throat cartilage fracture could only have been caused by a direct blow or manual strangulation. But the grand jury refused to indict Saylor's killers, just as they refused to indict the killers of Eric Gardner. And part of the social exoneration of the police in both cases was to blame both victims for their own deaths by citing their disabilities, including obesity. In capitalist society, there are many forms of bigotry. Rampant racism and ableism have been especially vicious in the high-profile case of Gardner. New York Representative Peter King, the cop who killed Gardner, Pantaleo, is attorney, and police, the so-called police union, which is not a union at all because the police are not workers, claim that Gardner died because Pantaleo strangled him. Not because Pantaleo strangled him, but because he was overweight, had asthma, and a heart condition. Excuse me. These views were expressed more crudely on the policeone.com site. Comments on the site about the deceased Gardner included, "This guy would have died going up a flight of stairs. He died because of his pre-existing medical conditions, and his family should sue Papa John's, Domino's, Pizza Hut, Burger King, McDonald's." The intersection of racism and disabilities can also be seen in a case soon to be argued before the U.S. Supreme Court, which seeks police exemption from the Americans with Disabilities Act. This case has critical importance for all those seeking to stop unwarranted police killings. Sheehan versus San Francisco is an appeal brought to the High Court by the City of San Francisco. Oral arguments are set for March 23rd. More than 40 civil rights activist groups had signed a letter urging San Francisco officials to drop the appeal to the Supreme Court. They warn that the appeal imperils the 1990 Americans with Disability Act quote, the most comprehensive civil rights law for Americans with disabilities, unquote. That's from the letter. The ADA mandates accommodations by those with disabilities and applies to every interaction between government and people with disabilities. It applies to the cops. Since over half of those wrongly killed by cops are already people with disabilities, even a greater number of such killings could be expected if police are exempt from the ADA. San Francisco seeks to overturn a Court of Appeals ruling which said that the San Francisco police violated the ADA in the 2008 shooting of a woman in psychiatric distress whom they were called to help. Teresa Sheehan, a woman in her 50s with a history of psychiatric disability, was off her medication and in the midst of a psychiatric episode. She had barricaded herself in her own bedroom at her group home residence, and she had a butter knife in her hands. Her caseworker called the police to ask for assistance in transferring her to a mental health facility for involuntary commitment and treatment. He did not even use a 911 number, but used a non-emergency line because he didn't think she was a threat to herself. Now, the San Francisco police have a team capable of responding to individuals in psychiatric distress and trained in de-escalation techniques to get people the care they need. Instead of waiting for backup from the team, 2 police officers entered Sheehan's room with guns drawn and shot her 5 times, including shooting her on the face when she was laying on the ground. The force was deadly, but Sheehan lived. She sued and successfully argued that the ADA applied to her interaction with police, so they are liable for civil rights violations as they did not take her mental disability into consideration. Now, the question now before the Supreme Court is not whether the police were right or wrong. It is simply that about Sheehan's right to proceed with a civil suit against the police for failing to accommodate her disability. The case could have implications for how police conduct themselves in a wide range of scenarios. While disability groups are certainly concerned about the situation in San Francisco, of much greater concern is that the Supreme Court is likely to go much further in its ruling than even San Francisco wants, pointing to a series of decisions by the current court, including the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. Disability activists are trying to get San Francisco to drop the appeal and resolve the matter locally. According to Jesse Lawrence, executive director of the Independent Living Resource Center in San Francisco, even to ask the questions, does the ADA apply during encounters with the police, is a miscarriage of justice. The ADA is a non-discrimination law that is always in effect, he said. It is designed to provide broad protections for some of the most vulnerable and gravely misunderstood people in society. This suit could open the floodgates to weakening the only protection people with disabilities have. This is incredibly dangerous. Lorenz concluded, the disability community cannot allow this to happen. We are organizing a public commitment campaign. I urge you to join us by writing to San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee and City Attorney Dennis Herrera, and demanding that they heed the call of civil rights advocates and San Franciscans alike by dropping the appeal. So this is what's going on right now. Oral arguments start on March 23rd. Now, the People with Disabilities Caucus of Workers' World Party looked around, and we saw that even though there was an appeal to write to San Francisco city officials, there was no letter, the generalized letter that people could use to address them. So we put together one, and it was in last week's copy of Workers' World newspaper. It has been circulated by members of the caucus, and I'd like to read it to you. Dear Mayor Lee and City Attorney Herrera, we join more than 42 civil rights and disability rights groups and many progressive individuals, and urging you to withdraw your appeal in the case of the City and County of San Francisco versus Sheehan, currently pending in the U.S. Supreme Court. Your appeal could result in the Supreme Court exempting police from the Americans with Disabilities Act, the most comprehensive civil rights law for individuals with disabilities. Your appeal could put the ADA at risk and could lead to an increase in unwarranted police killings of people with disabilities. People with disabilities need the ADA's protection when they encounter law enforcement. A 2013 study by Treatment Advocacy Center and the National Sheriff's Association revealed that at least half of the people shot and killed by police are people with mental disabilities. Many times these police have been called to help a person in psychiatric crisis. Often police who are first on the scene quickly respond with deadly force without waiting for units specially trained to deal with people with disabilities to arrive. In San Francisco, the figure is even higher. A local review of 51 San Francisco police-involved shootings between 2005 and 2013 found that 58% of the 19 shootings of people by police had a psychiatric, emotional, or mental disability. People with many types of disabilities, including intellectual disabilities, emotional disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, epilepsy and deafness, diabetes, if you have a mood swing, face dangerous and often deadly consequences when law enforcement officials fail to honor the ADA. The ADA needs to be expanded and honored, especially when it comes to encounters with the police. Having a disability must not be a death sentence. So we're asking you, people in this room and the people on the phone, to do what they can to distribute this letter. It's on your seats. There is a URL, a www URL. It has to be cut and paste right now. The emails are in the body of the letter. Jim just put it up on the People's Power Assembly site, where I think it's actually a little more accessible, but I don't have the URL for that. You can find it there. So it's a contribution that we can make to get it out. So please do sue, because disability must not be a death sentence.